This is a Geek Leader podcast, and I'm your host, John Rauda. This show is all about helping us grow as leaders, become better technologists, and improve our lives both at work and at home. I hope you enjoy the show and learn a lot. Hello, world, and welcome to a Geek Leader podcast. I'm your host, John Rauda. Today's sponsor is A2 Hosting. I've been using A2 Hosting solid-state hosting solutions for our website at geekleader.com for many, many years now, and absolutely love their support, their service, and all the features that you get. You get access to cPanel. You get all of the things that you can imagine for a great WordPress experience, including their A2 optimized WordPress, which does extra security checks, extra lockdown. You can lock down your editor file so you can't edit anything inside there. You get alerts whenever there are file changes that are done. You can also do automatic updates, backups, and more with A2 Hosting. So highly recommend it. Go to geekleader.com/A2 to get more information and to sign up for their solid-state, turbocharged speed hosting today. Again, that's geekleader.com/A2. All right, Geek Leaders, today I'm honored to have Andreas Creten on the show. He is the CEO and co-founder of Madewithlove, which is an app development firm. He helps companies and people build apps, build cool software. He also works with a lot of open source projects, which is really cool. And he served as CTO of several startups in the past, and he's the co-author of a book called Free Range Management. Andreas, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
If you don't mind, just tell the audience a little bit about your background and kind of how you got into development and what it is that you guys are doing.
Sure. Of course, it's a long story. Huh? I'm CEO of Madewithlove, a company I founded 15 years ago. And I kind of founded the company. First of all, I founded it when I was like 18 years old. And I was working in a couple of startups in Amsterdam and then in New York. And I figured there was sometimes a gap between non-technical management teams and their technical teams. And so what we try to do with Madewithlove is bridging that gap. So we're still a bunch of developers and CTOs that we have in our team. So we have developers that help customers on their engineering projects. But we also have a bunch of CTOs and residents in our team. And they actually help on the higher strategic stuff from a technical perspective, obviously. And so we try to bridge that gap with our team. So our engineers, they are also very communicative. They're pretty well in training and mentoring an engineering team. And so that's kind of what we do. For myself, I've been a CTO in a couple of startups. Most of the time, I moved from being the first developer to the lead developer to being the CTO. You know how that goes. Yeah. And then I quickly realized that I'm not the person to be in a company for too long, except my own company. So that's why I decided to do Madewithlove. Or actually, I never really decided to do it; it just happened. And so I don't have like a formal background in software engineering. I do have a degree in software engineering, but I got it after I started Madewithlove, and I also have a degree in management, but also I did that later on. I got passionate about computers when my dad threw away his first computer because it was broken, according to him. I think he just pulled the cable of the hard drive so he could buy a new one or something. So that gave me my first free computer, and that's how I got into it.
Nice. So I'm curious about you mentioned CTO and residency. What exactly is that, and how do you guys help other companies with that role?
So we maybe I'll explain a bit like all our services. I think it's a good idea. I mean, we can reference to them later as well. So typically we have two types of projects, the greenfields and the brownfields. So the greenfield projects are projects where founders that are not technical, they come to us with an idea and we help them realize that idea from a technical perspective. But we're not just an agency. Our goal is to build the first version of a platform, have it written in a good way that's transferable. I think that's very important. And we also help them with building their internal engineering team to take it over from us. So as soon as it's viable, as soon as it's launched, as soon as it's getting a bit more operational, we try to internalize the development with our customers, and then we are out again. So kind of a kickstarting companies from a technical perspective. Again, most of the time with non-technical founders that realize, and most of them already made an exit on our previous company, and they realize it's too hard to build your own engineering team in the beginning, so they rely on us for that. I would say that's about 20% of the work that we do. The other big part of the work is the brownfield projects where there is already a product and most of the time also a team, but they're hitting some kind of troubles from a technical perspective or with the engineering team as a whole. So typically it's like stability, scalability issues, but also more than you would expect, it's problems with the engineering team, how it's managed, or they have people running away from the team, or they cannot find the right people, or they have problems with the release process, or quality is an issue. Basically, what we do in there is we come with a small team, typically 2 to 6 people from our side it's led by a CTO in residence. And what we do there is, first of all, our engineers work together with the engineers from the customer side, and we really down in the trenches train them and show them how to write good software. So we're not just consultants telling them how to do it. We always will show it. So we dive into this code base, we contribute actively to it. We install best practices, and we do a lot of pair programming, for example, to bring the engineering team to the next level. So that's really down in the trenches. And then the second level is that strategic technical level, and there we try to do everything that's necessary to get things back on track. If there is already a CTO in the company, we will be assisting the CTO, sometimes as a VP of engineering or engineering manager, whatever you name it, and we will be installing the right processes, right procedures necessary to build good software. But more than you would expect, we also have the situation where the CTO leaves or gets fired, stuff like that, and then we really replace the CTO as well. So we will be the CTO at interim then in such a case. And again, with these kind of assignments, our goal is to come in, clean things up, and get out again. So you could say we're a bit like the A-team. That's really how we operate. And an assignment like that is typically 9 to 18 months. And we prepare everything for someone else to take it over from us. Ideally, we can find that person internally. We find someone in the team, or for example, the existing CTO feels more at ease and continues what we set out, or we try to find someone new to continue what we started. And then there is 2 other services that are related to that. One is our recruitment service. So we help engineering teams find good technical profiles. The nice thing is that we're all technically in our team. So we screen the candidates very well before we send them to a customer. So we don't just send like the blank CVs. We really send the qualified candidates. We have done a technical assignment already. We have had 2 interviews with them, and then only we send them to our customers. And the last thing that we do is technical due diligence, and it's, I guess, also a very interesting topic to talk about. And this is where we help investors and company management teams to figure out like how their technical team is operating and if they're ready for growth, basically. So typically in the light of a capital increase or potential sale of the company or acquisition, stuff like that. We're involved in 1 case every 2 weeks at the moment. We slowed a bit down. We used to have 1 a week, but it was a bit too heavy. So that's also a very active thing that we're doing.
Yeah, and definitely see something that would be very helpful for companies, especially when you're going through acquisitions and things like that.
Absolutely.
Come in. Yeah. Because I know I've gone through acquisitions, from being a purchaser, buying, our company was buying other companies. And sometimes the things that you're told do not match what you find when you do the due diligence and actually dig underneath. And sometimes, when you're a smaller company or you're a company that's short-staffed at the moment, it's very difficult to find resources on site to kind of go and find out how dirty the laundry really is.
Yeah, exactly. And it's also, we're really specialized in that. We've done more than 100 audits by now, and you have some techniques that you use to figure it out. And most, for example, in acquisition situation, typically they have like the CTO of the acquiring company talk with the CTO of the company that gets acquired, and maybe some of the engineers there, but you're never going to get like the full picture, and they might be hiding stuff from you. And we have a pretty good process of finding all those things as well. And like I said, we do them every week. So we're, we're just kind of a machine, how we operate it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen some crazy stuff going through some acquisitions where like you're told, oh yeah, this is a completely custom, app that we're, as part of this deal that you're getting the custom app. Okay. And then you look into it and it's like, well, it's built on this framework that you're paying like, $45,000 a month, to host it, and you can't move it off there. Otherwise the code's junk.
I recently had a situation where a very big Belgian utility company wanted to acquire another company that would be a very good fit for their portfolio. And I was doing the due diligence, and all the development was outsourced to external parties, which is absolutely not a problem. It could even be wise if you don't have the capabilities in-house to do that. But then I started asking like questions like about IP and stuff like that. And it turned out that they had no agreements with the contractors they're working with. With the contractors that you're working, I mean, I have an active relationship with. I think it's okay. You can maybe add an addendum or whatever to the contract. There were no contracts, but you can make something, right? But then they also realized, okay, even the people that worked on this for 3 years ago, right? They don't even have a contract with them, so you have to go back to them and tell them, okay, we need to get the IP from you, and and then of course they could ask to get paid for that because it was never transferred. So that kind of stuff is nasty, nasty business. Yeah. So yeah, it's very important to do it very well. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's a very interesting niche. So in the news recently, we've kind of heard about a bunch of layoffs and things that have been going on with Meta and Amazon and Microsoft and all these other firms. Is that something that calls alarm for folks, or is it like a
it's a good question? Yeah. So I actually wrote up so we have an internal blog where, I mean, if you go to our blog of Madewithlove, you will find a lot of interesting articles. Most of them originate also from our internal blog. So it's a very low end barrier of entry for people to write something, and then if we like it, we push it also to the main blog. And so I wrote an article last week on there to give a bit of context around those layoffs, because we were hearing in the team some kind of concerns, and I mean, and obviously, if you read online, you also see the same message. That, yeah, it's very simply they laid off a lot of people, but if you look at the absolute numbers compared to the number of people that they hired, I don't have the numbers in front of me. I can look them up, but it's minimal. I mean, I think, for example, Facebook doubled in size since 2019 in terms of headcount, and then they fired what is it, maybe 10,000 people or something.
Yeah.
I mean, it was only like 5% or something that they let go again. So
I heard the same thing with Microsoft.
I'm looking at the numbers at the moment. Yeah.
Let go of 14 or something.
Yeah. So I did all the math. I did it for Microsoft. Yeah. So for Microsoft, for example, between 2019 and 2023, they had an increase of 46% in headcount, so almost double. And then from 2022 to 2023, they reduced it by 4.5% again. So yeah, still they grew massively. Yeah. Even more than that because percentage based, but indeed, yeah. Actually, the 46% is including the layoffs. Yeah.
Oh wow.
So yeah, so they still almost grew by 50%. So obviously, I mean, and maybe I've seen that letter from I think it was to the Google management team from one of their investors, was saying, okay, you need to reduce the headcounts because as an investor we want you to do that. And obviously, it's all about the profit per share that needs to stay high. And since we have a little bit of slowdown in the economy, also the growth that was set up through the pandemic is slowing down in terms of people working online. And maybe a good indication of that is the recent details on the bandwidth. For example, for a country like Belgium, the average bandwidth used per day was all-time high last year. I think this year it was reduced by 15%. So that shows that people stream less, right? Because they have to do less Zoom meetings, so they go back more to the office. So that I guess shows that basically there was one thing is, of course, the recession, but there is also the other shift happening where people are moving back to the office more. And then you have a company like Microsoft, for example, was setting out very big on Teams. And maybe there is a bit of slowdown there, so they need to cut costs to be able to keep their profit per share. So it's all about capitalism rather than the actual numbers underneath.
Yeah. So is that how is that from a tech leadership standpoint? Is it good now that we, if I'm not one of those companies, I'm a mid-sized company, I'm not going through layoffs right now, but maybe I'm hiring. Does that mean the talent pool is up now and I could have a better choice? Or
I mean, if I talk for myself or my own company, those kind of profiles that they're firing or let go are out of our league. Let that be very simple. So especially Google, as far as what I understand that they did, is they fired a lot of very, employees with a lot of years in Google, like 16 years and stuff like that, probably because they were the most expensive people that they had on board. And I think it will depend. I mean, not every company will have had that same strategy, but um, so those kind of people, they will easily find another job for the same salary, I guess, in another high profile tech company. In general, the market is overheated anyway, so there is no way that it's easy to find the right people. You're in a very big. I mean, we've been a remote company for 15 years, so we've been always hiring remote, and I've really seen throughout those 15 years the market change, and especially with the pandemic. Now, basically, a software developer is kind of the profession is kind of globalized, right? The average pay of a good developer is the same throughout the world. Of course, maybe not on certain. I mean, if you go to India, I mean, its salary will still be low, but the quality might also not always be great. For example, if you want to find a good person in India, it's going to be the same price than if you want to have it in Poland or in Belgium, whatever. So that kind of globalized, and I've really seen that changing in the last maybe 6 years, and the pandemic really sped it up. And also, what you see is that companies who don't realize that they need to embrace this kind of remote working, they are just losing the hiring game massively. So especially with software engineers, that's really what I see. And maybe in the US it's still a bit different, because there is only maybe a couple of big cities where the tech scene is happening. But in Europe, it's spread across Europe. And especially we also have a lot of countryside, and people are not going to move anymore from the countryside. For example, we have a couple of customers in France. They expect their people to come to Paris 2 times a week. But I mean, no one is ever going to do that if you can live in the countryside in France and have a good connection. So they're just losing it like that.
Yeah, I think that's going to continue to be a growing trend of people losing those developers because of the commute. And we've seen a lot of push now. People, you hear Elon saying you gotta get back to the office, and all these companies saying you gotta get back to the office, but they're losing quality employees that don't want to get back to the office. And I find that there's so many openings still, even with this announcements of all these layoffs. Are still, I go to LinkedIn, I'm getting hit up all the time. Of course, always openings. So I think that's definitely a battle that you're gonna lose.
Yeah, those layoffs, either they happen because of it's a public company and they need to keep that profit per share high, or they are a venture-backed company and they need to extend the runway.
Yeah.
So and obviously when things go well, especially tech companies, they tend to hire a bit too many people, because it's good to have some talent running around. And then of course they need to sometimes be a bit more lean, and that's, I guess, what they're doing now. And it's hard in absolute numbers, but if you put it relatively, it's Do
you think it's kind of one of those things where Microsoft sees that Meta laid off a bunch, and Google sees that Amazon's laying off a bunch, so now we kind of feel pressure from the investors that they all have to?
I don't think that they look at it like that. I think it's really the individual investors telling them to do that. I wouldn't think this, because otherwise Apple would also have been laying off people, and they haven't so far. And they haven't hired that aggressively either, I believe. I'm not 100% sure, but so they have been a bit more sensible, I guess, with their people than other companies. I think it's pretty brutal also to do what they're doing. I think if they would have done a hiring stop, and maybe also, for example, a salary freeze, people would have left anyway, and they would have maybe achieved the same numbers. But yeah,
sure.
Maybe they also just wanted to clean things up,
Yeah, could be. Anyway, let's shift gears a little bit and talk. I was curious when you said the brownfield development, where you kind of come in and either help out with existing developers with the pair programming. And when you come into an environment like that, how much of your methodologies and the way of doing things that you guys have with Madewithlove that you bring in and kind of try to get them to adopt? Like, if they're still using waterfall development, do you come in and try to push Scrum or Kanban or something like that? Or is it more just, do you push test-driven development or anything like that? Or is it just, let's see what they're doing
So, it's a 2 steps approach. So we come in and we observe, right? We don't want to come in and from day one start shouting, you have to do this like this, or you're doing this wrong, That's not how it works. It's also about psychology as well. So we want to first gain the trust from the people, that they know that we're reliable folks to work with, that they really are there to help them out, not to replace them. I think that's very important. And then once we kind of see what their issues are, we try to focus on the right things to fix. Typically, if there is no CI/CD pipeline yet, that's probably one of the first things we will install. Once you have that in place, you can indeed start thinking about some testing. And indeed, with the new code that we write anyway, will be test-driven development. We'll be following our best practices. But for example, we will put in a linter maybe. In the beginning, it only lints new codes, right? And then gradually we start enabling it for more and more sections of the code base. That's kind of stuff. And then from the process perspective, also there we look at what they're doing. If they're doing waterfall, obviously you would want to change that. But then it starts with product management that's probably doing something wrong. So then we have to first work there on okay, how are you approaching your problems that you're having? How do you come to the solution? Do you do the right research? How do you define what you're going to do? If they're writing out these kind of massive documents with specifications, we're going to learn them how to involve the engineers in thinking as well, not just executing. I think it's very important to empower developers to also be able to think about, give them a problem. That's what engineers want, right? They want a problem to solve. They don't want a solution to write. So we really believe that you should pull in engineers very early in the process, for example, because sometimes they can come up with way better ideas than any other person can come up with. So we start on the product side, then we probably moving more into the processes. Okay, if you're using waterfall, maybe we'll implement some kind of Scrum system. If you are using a Kanban, that's fine for us as well. That doesn't really matter. It's not that we say need to use Scrum with a 2-week sprint. No, we're not like that. We really we try to understand also from the team what they want, what they like, and how they prefer to work. But for example, also from the human resources perspective, we're typically implementing one-on-ones if they don't have it yet, retrospectives. We're adding some kind of review system, like a performance review every half a year or something like that. If they don't have it yet, we look at the hiring pipeline. How does that work? A lot of companies just have we have the vacancy on our website and we expect people to mail to this email address, and then it goes into an Excel sheet, right? So then we tell them, no, you have to use an ATS for that. So applicant tracking system that publishes also to LinkedIn and to Indeed and whatever. And so that's the kind of stuff that we're dealing with also from a more strategic perspective. And then typically we end up with okay, what are you actually doing? Why are you doing this? What's the strategy? What's the vision of the company or the products that you're building? So we even go that far. And then in the end, we also work on the budgets, okay, what kind of budget do you have? What kind of budget is required to bring this to the next level? If necessary, we go to find approval from the board to increase the budget, stuff like that. So we go really far.
Yeah, wow. It's a whole lot more than just assisting with development.
Yeah, no, we're basically we are the CTO, or we do everything that the CTO needs. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. I think that's great. I think that's where a lot of companies are lacking because, when I think about areas or companies in my area that, it's not like a tech center that you think of when you think of Silicon Valley or anything like that. But, most companies have a software engineering team with developers, and maybe they have, 8 to 12 developers. Maybe they have one Scrum Master, maybe, if they're lucky. Other times they just have a director of engineering that kind of does everything. Mm-hmm. And there is no insight into what people should be doing today as far as best practices. There is no insight into how can we benefit the company, and how can we move the engineers closer to the product development side so that they can be offering input and feedback. A lot of times it's on the back end where they're just taking requests via a ticketing mm-hmm. system or something like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's really cool how you will come in and actually kind of assess it from the whole gamut of things that happen in their technology.
Yeah, I always tell people, if you do your product management well, you can speed it. You can double the speed of the engineering team because the briefing is better, and especially in those kind of organizations where indeed there's some kind of ticketing system and people are just throwing stuff over the wall. What you see very often is that they get thrown a ticket at them. Like, I have an example actually of something today. I had a customer that asked, like, okay, we want to implement this thing where we want to have a special list filtering on a special status, and there was like some kind of counter in the end that counts the total of the list, and the plain list without a filter. They wanted to exclude certain statuses from the counter. So let's say it's invoices, and you don't want to have to draft invoices in the total, right?
Okay.
And of course we can implement that. I told them, okay, we can do that. That's totally fine. But also maybe if we implement a filter for the statuses where you have multiple selection, where you can say, I want these statuses to be listed. Then first of all, the drafts are out because typically you don't want to see them. And second, the count will also be correct. And there it's like, that's fine. And we saved probably half a day of development work by just having a better discussion with them. While if you just have engineers executing stuff, they will go ahead and just implement whatever is asked. And so we have something that we call a responsible engineer. That's what our engineers are. Those are people that think a bit further. They also question like the 5 why system, where they ask the question, why do you want to do that? Again, why is that? And by asking the 5 whys, they'll understand way better what a customer exactly wants to achieve. And so that's also why we tell customers, don't write as a solution, write down the problem that you're having, and we will together find a solution for it.
Yeah, that's where I remember back when I was my first time managing software developers, and we were still using Waterfall back then, and I switched over to Scrum because my wife's a Scrum master. She was telling me, oh, you have to do this, you have to try it, so we kind of went through the training process and kind of moved over to it. And then we had our first kind of request came in that we decided to do the 5 whys and kind of dig out to it. And it was very similar to what you said. We had a mobile app that our engineers that were in the field would go and, close out tickets from, and they wanted the ability to they wanted the close button of their ticket to be at the top of the ticket instead of the bottom. That was the request. But what we found by asking the whys is what they really want to do is bulk close tickets, because they always wait to the end of the day in case they have to reopen one of those. They don't want to have to go back to the process. So it's like after a conversation, we can just do a select all and close. It's very simple, and that's even easier on us and easier on you.
Yes. That's a thing that a lot of people don't realize that it works that way. And a lot of people are really fancying up the engineering team. But especially the modern developers, they want to understand. It's the same with, people from my generation, we want to have impact, right? And I think even the generation that's coming up, they want to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. So I think it's way better and it's way more engaging for the engineering team to understand what they're doing and why they're doing it. That's why I really hate a company where you have architects and analysts, right? Because they're chewing everything for the engineering team. And for me, that's makes absolutely no sense. Absolutely no sense. Okay, from a product perspective, you need to prepare everything as good as possible, but there should not be someone saying, we had this case, we audited a company, it was really crazy. There was a company and they had 500 people in engineering, distributed between the Netherlands, Belgium, and India. And the people in Belgium were not programmers, right? They were business analysts, whatever they call them, who would write out pseudo code. So they would write down code in a Word document that would be sent to India, where they would type it in Java and then send it back, and the people would run it and see if it was doing what they needed. I'm like, why aren't you then just writing the code in Java? Or why don't you? Yeah, it was crazy. Especially because even the code changes, they were making the code change in the pseudocode, and then the people in India had to change it in their code. It was ridiculous. And I think a lot of companies, especially bigger organizations like banks and stuff, they still work like that.
Yeah, that's crazy to me, because you could literally cut your staff in half and pay,
of course,
one group of staff maybe 10% more, and get.
It's all about titles and culture, I guess, and also hiding behind consultants is very easy. Mm-hmm. If you recently we made a proposal for an audit, also for an acquisition, I think, and they wanted to have some extra services, and where also, for example, we give advice on the budget and the strategy. And so we made a proposal for that bespoke proposal, because typically our audits are like fixed fee that everyone knows. And I mean, we didn't win the deal, and asked them like who did it. It was Ernst & Young who got to do it. And they thought they were absolutely not happy with the audit. They paid twice the price that if we would do it, and they put like 2 juniors on it to do it, and the outcome was like, yeah. So that's but you never get fired for hiring a Big Four. That's what I always say. Yeah.
Sure. So let's talk a little bit about, you mentioned, the importance of culture and things like that. And you have a book called Free Range.
Management.
Let's talk a little bit about, what you mean by that. What is the philosophy behind that and building a good culture for a development and engineering team?
Sure. So, the idea of, the subtitle is how to manage knowledge workers by creating space. So it's really about free range, like with chicken, right? Where chicken who are in free range produce better eggs than the ones that are looked up. And we believe it's the same with knowledge workers. So basically, as a person, you need to get the freedom to do your best work. And if you really micromanage it, you'll never get out of it. That's more or less the idea behind it. And so in the book, it's a very practical guide. It's more than a book where we give a lot of pointers like how we manage the team, or we believe how you should manage the team. And some couple of things I mentioned already during the call. During this episode, were already in there. For example, like how you implement a good review process, doing retrospectives, stuff like that, one-on-ones. Mm-hmm. So it's not only for engineers or engineering managers or whatever. Applies to everyone dealing with knowledge workers. We wanted to take it that broad. And it's that's what it covers. And if you ask me like what kind of management style do I have, I always put it down to this: I like to build a company. I would like to work myself. So whatever decision I make from a human resources perspective, or how I run the company, is always with that in mind. So for me, people come first, and then the customers. So if you have happy people, we'll have happy customers, and when our customers will be happy, the profit will follow. Right? That's how I see things. Yeah.
So I'm curious about the retrospectives, because I've worked on Scrum teams before. We have your different ways of doing retrospectives, and there's different formats from time to time. And sometimes Scrum Masters will get really creative and have really cool retrospectives, and other times they're kind of just bland. But do you do retrospectives outside of like the development and engineering, like for other parts of the project or other parts?
Yeah, absolutely. We have them throughout the organization. So obviously in projects, it depends on what the clients like, right? We like I said, we never dictate what to do. So some projects will have them, others won't. But for example, I told you that we do a lot of audits. Every quarter, we have a retrospective with everyone who had been on an audit in that time frame, where basically we figure out like, okay, how has it been? How have they been running audits? Anything that we can improve? So we do them with, we have like the CTOs in residence. We do them amongst them as well every 3 months, I believe. We do them with the management team every, I think once a year. So it's more, it's a bigger exercise that we're doing it. But between our little 3 people management team, we also do it to make sure that we're on the right track and we're doing the right things.
Yeah. So how important is it to get buy-in on freedom to speak during these retrospectives? Because I know sometimes, like the first time I implemented Scrum and we tried to do retrospective, everybody was like nervous and afraid to like bring up anything.
Yeah, there is a couple of techniques for that. So maybe a little story about that. So it's also in the book, I believe. But when you have a brainstorm session, I think that's a very good example. So let's say you have an engineering team and a product owner, let's say 8 people in total, and they need to discuss something, some kind of feature that they need to build. Typically, if you're co-located in an office, how it would happen is like, okay, guys, we have to discuss something, set up a meeting. We all walk into the meeting room with the whiteboards, and that's how the meeting starts, right? And that's the most horrible way of doing it. Why? Because all the extroverts will be at the whiteboard shouting and getting things on the whiteboard, while the introverts will be quiet all meeting, and you will even not notice it because as an extrovert, you're not noticing that. In a remote context, it's a bit different, but again, you'll have the same problems. So for these kind of meetings, what we do, and you can also do it for retrospective, you can ask people to prepare upfront, write down your opinion before we go into that meeting. And then as the leader of the meeting, collect all those opinions. Don't share it with everyone. Collect those opinions, read them, and then you can start a discussion based on those opinions. And you can basically include people in the conversation by mentioning their opinion or really getting them to give their opinion, because you know that they have it in a certain way. To give an example, we are with the management team. I told you we do a retrospective every year. It's coming up in 2 weeks. So I'm sending to my 2 partners, and I'll fill out myself as well, a survey that will take them about 1 hour to fill out. But then, and it's about questions like, how do you see growth? Do you think we should exit at one point in time? Okay, if that's the case, in what time frame do you see that for yourself? All these kind of questions that if you would be in a discussion and we bring it up, the first person that talks will influence already all the other people. But if you did in the survey asynchronously and you don't look at each other's results, and I will look at them before we go into the session, but then it's way more, you have way more things to discuss, and you really have the opinion of everyone. So, for example, you can also do that for retrospective, tell people to prepare front, and then to send it in, or to, when the meeting starts, to put it on the board. Yeah.
No, I like that. I like the idea of preparing up front and sending it in. That way you're not being influenced. Because I know a lot of times where I will have ideas of how I think something went, and then I'll hear someone else say something, and I'll feel like, oh, maybe my idea is wrong, and I'll kind of cower down and not want to share it, because I feel like their idea sounds like maybe I had the wrong perspective. Maybe it's my fault that this didn't go well, and I should just keep my mouth shut.
Yeah, but it really helps to figure out those small, and especially when you go on like a management retreat or a team retreat where you have a little longer time, it really adds a lot of value to do that. Or to just really have people, it is in a physical context, sit down with the people, give them 10 minutes to write things down on a post-it, and really make sure that everyone puts their post-its on the board. So there is you can always see the different opinions of people. That's the only way to get them out, I think.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. And also, you mentioned one-on-ones, implementing those. I think those are really important. And a lot of companies, they don't have a formal one-on-one. I don't think it has to be too formal. But as long as you have something scheduled, something that repeatable, that you always do, and you always know it's there, I think that's really important. I've been at some places where you do have formal ones where it's like, we're going to ask you these 3 questions every single time. And sometimes it gets a little bit repetitive. Sometimes it's, it depends on how it is. But what is your take on one-on-ones?
Yeah, it depends a bit on the person. So I think almost 5 years ago, we had a discussion on feedback. And that's also in the book as an anecdote that I wrote down. Is like, we had my co-author of the book, Steve, join our company, who was an American, was our first American in the team. And we had a discussion about feedback amongst the whole team. And we hear opinions, and for example, Belgian or French people, if we get feedback once a year, we're fine. But then Steve is an American, I need that feedback every day. I want to work with I always want to get any feedback, and I'll be very direct, which I really appreciate, to be very clear. And it was a huge gap between, and also there we asked it up front. I think that was very powerful, because we asked it up front, how often do you want to have feedback, and then we could show the spectrum to the team. Some people are really once a year, and we had one person said every 2 weeks, and we had a discussion about that. And so we really tailor the feedback loop to the person as well. So within the team, in our team, we have bi-yearly, so every semester that is, we have a formal feedback session. But then we have one-on-ones, and it really depends on the person. There is people I have them with every 2 weeks. There's every month, every 2 months. It really depends on what they like or what I think is necessary. We have people that really prepare them extremely well, where they put in the things that they want to discuss, and other people, they just, we go into the meeting and we just chit chat. It's really how people like it. We also have the direct feedback system, where basically if you have something to say about someone, just say it straight out. Don't wait for some kind of planned feedback session. I think that makes a lot of sense. But for example, for myself, I'm not a very good into preparing all this stuff, because I'm running from meeting to meeting. But we have other people doing one-on-ones who really write down, okay, these are the things I want to discuss. And that makes a ton of sense as well. Having a good tool to run your one-on-ones really helps. We use Know Your Team, maybe you've heard about it. But there's other things like 15.5 or whatever tool you're using, it helps organizing them, and it helps making sure that you have everything in place to keep them going.
Yeah, no, I think that's really good. I like the way you said you kind of tailor for each person, because I found that some people on my team, they just want a couple of minutes to chit chat, and we can do that. Sometimes they pop in every day and we're having this little cough. Other people, you have to schedule it and, really pull things out of them to get them to talk. So you have to have like a list of questions or something that you want to do. And I found that it's helpful for me to do like walking one-on-ones, to go out in nature and walk around a little bit.
Absolutely. I mean, we're a remote company, so for us it's a bit harder. But I think one of the things that I think is very important is that you keep a little bit of notes from what you discussed in the one-on-one, and we share it also with the team most of the time. Because that creates some kind of paper trail of what you discussed, the concerns that they have, and they feel heard as well. It's not only because you're in the call and you're saying yes, yes, yes. Of course, if you write it out as well in your own words, you show them that you understood what their concerns are, for example. So that's definitely something that I would recommend doing. And also, if you're giving people feedback or warning them about some kind of behavior, if you write it down, it's a lot easier to reference to later on, because in so many cases in other companies where I go as a CTO at interim, we go helping there and we see, for example, a person with toxic behavior, and we ask like the management team, okay, how are you dealing with that? Yeah, with the one-on-ones. And it's like, okay, but where can I see the paper trail of that? Like, have you been discussing it with them? Yeah. But then, for example, if it's, I am going to say French again, but French are very good at saying things between the lines. But if you're not reading the between the lines, then maybe the people really didn't understand that you were giving them feedback, right? So by writing it out, it's very clear for all the parties involved, even if, both positive and negative feedback. So there is no discussion about it later on. I think that's very, very valuable.
No, I think that's really good, especially when you're looking at documentation for either promoting someone. It's good to have that information about all the good things that you talked about, or also if you have to get rid of someone, it's good to have that documentation of things that they didn't upheld. This has been a really good conversation. I really appreciate it. How can people connect with you online, find out more about Madewithlove and your book that you got coming out?
So we have our website, of course, madewithlove.com. We have a nice blog as well. I think you can subscribe to our newsletter there if you want to get updates on blog posts. For free range management, the website for the book is freerange.management. We're not shipping to the US yet. We're hopefully fixing that this week. So hold your horses. And you can find myself on Twitter. So it's just my full name, and LinkedIn obviously as well. So if you want to reach out, more than happy to talk.
Awesome. And I'll link that up in the show notes too at geekleader.com. Thanks so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it.
No worries. It was a pleasure.
If you enjoyed that episode, please leave a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. I'd greatly appreciate that. And also, don't forget to check out merch. We have some t-shirts that I've designed that are on at geekleader.com. You can click on the merchandise section there and check that out. And also, don't forget about the books from our guests. So if you like this guest and other guests that have written books, please go ahead and check that out at geekleader.com. I would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure they would too.